Counter-Strike is pretty much the last modern first-person shooter that gives you full customizability of your settings. Of course, there are some negative ramifications to this, but generally, players enjoy this aspect of Counter-Strike, tailoring their experience to the fullest. This can range from dedicated keybinds for each nade, the almost mandatory jump nade keybind for consistent jump nade lineups, and even custom binds to spam whatever you want in chat. But that's boring. Today, we'll be discussing niche, almost irrelevant keybinds that you might find useful for your current setup and needs. This video is sponsored by SkinsMonkey. SkinsMonkey is a 24/7 online trading service for CS2 that is extremely easy to use and completely transparent. You just select your skins, the skins you want to trade for it, and they'll send you the offer. It's that simple. Right now, they are offering a 30% bonus on your first deposit and up to 35% if you use my code WAZOO at the top, along with an additional free $5 if you trade $100. That's a lot of free money, so check out SkinsMonkey today and use my code WAZOO. Thank you, SkinsMonkey. Let's start with one that I actually learned from Simple, so I'm going to let him explain what it is.
Okay, I have some CSGO binds. C for the radar, so it goes more huge or more small.
Now what Simple is explaining is a bind that can quickly toggle the size of his minimap so that it can be out of the way when he doesn't need it and large and clear when he does. But you can make it an adjustable keybind so that you can have different levels to it, or how I personally run the keybind is having it toggle zoom, so that you have full map visibility for a majority of the round, but in crucial instances, you can hone in the accuracy of the positions of your teammates and enemies. This can be used to find hidden bombs on bomb sites much easier, but the best use I found for the extra zoom is to take a page out of Valorant's book, where you can use the larger icons to get a much more precise location of enemies through smokes. Now, in Valorant this is far more useful since there are so many more ways to gather information safely, but there are fringe cases in CS where you can get some cheeky shots through. The one that I see the most success in is the not too uncommon situation where you are smoked off cross in Dust 2, and your teammate is ego peeking on A site towards long. Oftentimes you'll have some T's hugging the right side of long, which makes it very easy to activate zoom on your minimap and quickly get accurate shots through with an M4A1S. There are a few other spots on other maps where you can do this trick. Smoking yourself out on Mirage between triple and default is a fun one if the T's forego the standard stairs smoke, but the keybind is generally useless in most scenarios. But hey, that's kind of the point of the video. But what if you're too much of a gamer and are suffering from arm pains from flicking around too much? You can have a bind that turns your perspective left and right for you, just like a controller.
I have a turn bind, plus left and plus right. To be honest, quite useless.
I guess it's mouse 3 and mouse 4 on the thumb. I turn left and right with these.
Despite how strange this bind might seem, it actually makes a lot of sense for players who play with ungodly low sensitivities, or if you want to use a lower sensitivity but simply just don't have the mousepad space for it. I personally never used this one, so I decided to test it out for myself in a free-for-all deathmatch. So I booted up a game, made my sensitivity a quarter of what it is normally so that I can't just rely on my mouse movement, and we're off. Okay, maybe only make it half of my normal sense. What I ultimately learned from this experience is that these two are psychos. I don't doubt that you can get good with these settings, because I mean these two are better than me and there's a guy who literally plays CS on a controller, but the turn speed is what really gets me. It's super slow and honestly really finicky to use. Eventually, I just gave up and turned my sense back to normal. Ah, that's better. I really did take mouse movement for granted. However, your aim is only ever going to be as good as your movement, and there are a few binds that can optimize your movement. Some are easy to implement, some are less so. Let's start with the easy ones. Most players play with either scroll wheel up or scroll wheel down to jump to make bunny hopping easier. In addition, some continue to use spacebar to jump in conjunction with scroll wheel for familiarity, but for those who solely use the scroll wheel to jump, this leaves the spacebar for anything. Now some use the spacebar as a grenade keybind or something superfluous like an inspect bind, but my favorite employment of the bind that I've seen comes from Virtus Pro's James, who uses spacebar as his walk key, while moving his crouch key one key up. In his case it's Z since he plays RDFG. This not only makes crouching easier, but also keeps the spacebar as a movement key, while being far less punishing if you accidentally hit it while accessing another bind with your thumb. But should you follow this setup, this leaves control open as a keybind. What you might want to replace it with is a crouch jump bind. Some people use this bind as they struggle to hit crouch consistently with their pinky when crouch jumping, so this bind just automates the process for you. In this configuration that we have set up, this is kinda useless considering that crouch is now in the much more natural position of shift, so there really isn't any point to have this bind at control. However, if you are using something more normal, you could consider this bind if you find crouch jumping tricky for comfort reasons or otherwise. Before we go into the second movement change and the last bind setup in this video, let's do a few rapid fire binds that nearly made it into the video but weren't quite useless enough. For you AWPers, this is a quick way to quick switch out of your AWP after you fire. So instead of hitting a quick switch bind twice or hitting your knife bind and then your primary bind, this just does it in one press. But if your teammate keeps dropping you the bomb over and over again, this is a bind that makes dropping bomb even easier, simplifying the process down to one press. This one is actually pretty useful, just annoying to set up for every single game in the future, and it's moving from WASD to ESDF or Beyond. I mentioned this before with Jame using RDFG, but the thought process of moving your binds like this is that you get more buttons surrounding your ring finger and pinky without much need to alter your finger's muscle memory too much. Again, not saying that it's not useful, it's almost objectively better than using WASD, but having to set this up for every single new game you play is actually so frustrating. But maybe I shouldn't be speaking. I have lied to you all. I have been pretending to be a normal WASD wielding, God-fearing American. But that is not the truth. The truth is, I have been using V to move backwards instead of S. Now, before you unsubscribe to my channel and report me to your local authorities, let me at least try to defend myself. The reason why a majority of PC gamers use WASD on a standard ISO and NC keyboard is due to a certain man named Dennis Thresh Fawn, who popularized the setup when he won the first nationwide Quake tournament back in 1997. He certainly isn't the first to use WASD, but because of his win, he did influence a lot of game developers to make WASD standard in their game. It was a great control scheme as it resembles the arrow keys that most gamers were used to in the early stages of PC gaming, and there are plenty of accessible buttons for your fingers to use. But what a lot of Quake players soon learned was that this scheme just wasn't good enough for a game where movement plays such a crucial part in all gunfights. This caused many players to use mouse 2 to move forward so that they can have their middle finger dedicated to moving backwards, which would eventually influence Mezzi of Team Vitality and Fasher of 00 Nation. But why would this affect Counter-Strike? The most important movement technique in Counter-Strike in regards to gunplay is counter-strafing. In Counter-Strike, there is acceleration to your movement, which means you do not start and stop at full speed as soon as you press a key. There is a little bit of glide between your movement actions. So in order to prevent this small delay so that you can be accurate faster, you would quickly tap the opposite movement key to stop faster. Now, this is great for strafing left and right, since your index and ring finger are ready to hit the opposite direction. But what about W and S? Compared to the elegant team of your index and ring finger, you have to overwork your poor middle finger to hit both W and S, and I simply cannot stand for that. So by dedicating my thumb to moving backwards, I can counter-strafe forwards and backwards with ease. But the real question is, does this actually have any real advantages? Short answer, no. While it is far easier to counter-strafe forwards and backwards, and you can actually do diagonal counter-strafes with ease, the maps are generally not built for this. There are 0 angles in which you are going to be peeking by pressing forward that you can't do strafing left or right, and peeking a corner diagonally is slower than just swinging in one direction since there's more ground to cover because of Pythagorean theorem, which therefore means a decrease in perceived velocity in the perspective of someone only viewing you in one plane. The only real tangible benefit is maybe when you are entry fragging or playing like a monkey, you can counter-strafe easier off of aggro plays. But even then, most entry fraggers have learned pathing that mostly involves sideways movement. But what about accidentally hitting spacebar? Well, that's the point of having walk bound as spacebar. But wait, I hear you cry. Was this video an attempt to share your shitty keybinds with your viewers? Well,